Hey everybody, Andy Ryder here with Project Lab. I've used an inverted jigsaw jig quite a bit in the videos here. A couple of people have asked for more details about my setup, so let's take a closer look. For those who don't know, a jigsaw is a power tool that lifts and lowers a blade really fast. It's kind of like a mini robot arm holding a tiny handsaw. You can swap out this blade to cut a variety of materials. And the tool lets you make all sorts of cuts. This long, thin blade is very versatile. But that same long, thin blade also makes the tool kind of a pain to use. It can flex during your cut. At best, you get a cut that's not square. At worst, the blade drags you off your cut line and makes it tough to get back on. But there is a way to fix this, and that's to flip the jigsaw upside down. Now we can see when the blade starts to flex, and if you're working with small parts, it suddenly becomes a lot easier to move them around to exactly where you want to cut. There's some great videos out there on how to build an inverted jigsaw jig to hold your jigsaw upside down like this. DIY Creators and Paisan Woodworking are a couple of good examples. But what if you have no interest in making a jig like that? That's where I was back in 2016. I got stuck in a gumption trap, as Robert Pirsig would have called it. I needed to cut out some letters for a sign for the mascot theory, and the only tool in the wood shop that would do this was my jigsaw. I didn't have a bandsaw or a good scroll saw at the time. The deadline was approaching, so I got desperate. I literally just flipped this upside down and clamped it in a workmate. And it worked! At least for the bigger letters. For the smaller ones, I found I had to attach a piece of plywood to the top of the shoe to support the smaller pieces over the gap around the blade. There's this huge gap in the shoe here because on this side, the shoe can adjust to different angles for angled cuts. So in theory, this other side, which has more support around the blade, should be locked at 90. But as you can see, it's definitely not 90. Notice that gap at the top of the blade there. That shouldn't be there, and you will notice that when you're cutting. This jigsaw still is awesome. I've worked the heck out of it. I just haven't been able to figure out how to fix that, so I always keep it on the angled side. Luckily, it's not too hard to make a plate like this. Just take a scrap piece of plywood, drill a hole for the blade, slide that over the blade, and clamp it to the jigsaw. I used this new setup in 2017 to cut the curved ends of the cam levers on my retractable table saw wheels. This platform gives your workpiece more support as well, so it's easier to keep things square against the blade. One problem with this is that clamp. It can get in the way of larger workpieces that maybe have to move around behind the blade as you cut. One way to get around this is with wood scraps and screws. I'll cut up a bunch of chunks of this, 3/8 thick plywood, and I'll screw it in a perimeter around the shoe of the jigsaw. I'm going to screw the front and right side pieces on first because then I can push the jigsaw against those to get my left and back pieces tightish against the jigsaw shoe. And then I'll use 2 more chunks on the left and right to hold the jigsaw down tight. And now it's clamped in place. That's what I used to cut the trash can holes out for my trash can cabinet later that year. I used the jigsaw like that for a while this way, but one negative of this setup is that it takes some work to get the jigsaw out of the jig when you need to freehand something. For example, if you're cutting elaborate shapes one moment and then long straight cuts in the next. Jack Howling offers one way around this. He holds his inverted jigsaw in place with some super strong magnets. Those are more than enough to hold the tool in place for most materials like wood. But if you're cutting something like sheet steel, I'd recommend going with a stronger hold. The blade can get caught in the steel and start jerking your workpiece around. So I suspect it'd be strong enough to pull those magnets away as well. So instead we'll use these two... Oh no, My battery. So instead we'll use these 200-pound capacity vertical surface clamps. You can get a 2-pack of them for 12 bucks on Amazon right now. These should be plenty strong to hold the jigsaw in place while also offering easy removal. From here, the only problem left is holding the jig in place. It'd be nice to ditch the workmate. It's a little low to the ground and the clamp can eventually start to work itself loose. Mine's a real cheap one. So let's build a simple box. Both pocket hole screws and butt joints are perfect for this. It's just a matter of whatever you're comfortable with. Now I can clamp the box from the bottom and work more securely wherever I want. And what do you know, we've got a proper inverted jigsaw jig. I literally have not had one till now. So I've gotten past my gumption trap, and meanwhile that same gumption trap didn't stop me from getting other stuff done. So if you wish you could cut elaborate shapes in wood, but you don't have a bandsaw, and you don't have a scroll saw, and if you're not quite ready to build an inverted jigsaw jig yet, then don't sweat it. Just flip your jigsaw upside down and get to work. You can do the rest later. I hope you liked this video. If you want to see more, then please consider subscribing. And if you have any thoughts or questions, don't hesitate to leave them in the comments down below on YouTube. I try to respond to everybody who stops by. Thanks for watching.